This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Bruchim Habayim. Thanks for bearing with us. Welcome to the Kol Agad Perka of Kew Garden Hills. Thanks everyone for joining. We begin our new series, Ala Torah, Tavshin Pei Beis, B'siyata D'Shmaya, Ve'ezras, Tzureinu, V'Gay Aleinu. We have the Marmakomis that are up. Be'ezras Hashem, we hope B'siyata D'Shmaya at the end of the week that the new Sefer on Bereshis should be available. Rabbi Yisrael, is there a way to mute the participants on the phone?
Morning, how you doing? Okay, I will do that.
Okay. And if everyone would kindly mute themselves on the Zoom. Thank you very much. Okay.
All participants are now muted.
Okay. We're going to begin today's Shiur discussing a interesting personality which one would not expect that would be relevant to Parshas Noach, and yet we're going to see this individual is a central character of Parshas Noach. The Gemara says in Brachos, Tezayin Beis, it's the Mishnah, Perek Beis, Mishnah Zayin. Uchshemeis Tavi Avdai. When Tavi, the servant of Rabban Gamliel, passed away, Kibel Alav Tanchumen. Rabban Gamliel accepted consolation. It is known that Rabban Gamliel, the Nasi of Klal Yisrael, had a slave who was quite learned. His name was Tavi. And Rabban Gamliel accepted consolation upon the demise of Tavi. Amrulai Tamidav Loili Matanu Rabbeinu, didn't you teach us, Rabbi, Shein Mekam Tanchumen al Avadim? You don't accept Tanchumen on a slave. Number one, they're not Jewish. Number two, they're not related to you. Amar Lohem Ein Tavi Avdi Kashar Kol Avadim. Tavi, my servant, is not like other slaves. Kosher haya. He's kosher. Which is a bit of an unusual expression. What do you mean he's kosher? Hey, what are you having for supper tonight? I went to the store, I got a new dish. What is it called? It's called Tavi. What do you mean Tavi's kosher? So of course we know it means he's kosher. But why that expression? Why the expression? We could say he's a ne'eman. You could say he's a meyuchas. What do you mean kosher? So one thing we know about this slave Tavi is he's kosher. Number two, the Gemara in Sukkah, Chafam Abeis, Hayashin Tachas Hamita B'Sukkah Le'yotzei Chavase. If you sleep under a bed in a sukkah, you're not Yotzei Yechiv. Rabbi Yehuda said, Noyagin Hoyinu, we were accustomed, Shayinu Yishenim Tachas Hamita, that we slept under the bed, Mipnei Hazakenim. V'amru lanu davar, nobody ever said boo to us. Amar Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shimon said, Maisa b'Tavi avdoi shel Rabban Gamliel. There's a story about Tavi, the slave of Gamliel. Shahaya Yashin Tachas Hamita, he slept under the bed. V'amar lehen Rabban Gamliel said, L'zakenim, Re'yisam Tavid avdi. You see Tavid, my slave, Shu Talmid Chacham. Not only is he a kosher, he's a Torah sage. V'yodea, he knows Shavadim Tumin Sukkah, that slaves are pater, therefore Lefikach Yashino Tachas Hamita, therefore he sleeps under the bed. So meaning Ram Gamliel is saying that Tavi did well by sleeping under the bed. Why? Because since he's not chayiv in Sukkah, so he wanted to make room for those who were, and under the bed you're not yotzei. Lefi darkeinu lamadnu, says the Mishnah, in accordance with our path, we learn Shayoshin Tachas Hamita la yotzei dei chayvasai. By the way, that Toysus points out that he only went under the bed when the Zakanim were there. When the Zakanim left, Tavi made sure to stay in the sukkah. So we know another thing about this Tavi. Not only was he a kosher, he's a Talmid Chacham. Furthermore, he likes to sit in the sukkah. He likes to hang out in the sukkah. Why does Tavi like to hang out in the sukkah? It's interesting. Why is Tavi hanging out in the sukkah? A third thing we find in the Mechilta, Mikan Amru, Hakol Chayavim B'Talmud Torah. Everyone's obligated to learn, Chutz Minashim Avadim, except for women and slaves. Michal Bas Kushi Hoysamanachas Tefillin. Michal wore tefillin. By the way, are women obligated to wear tefillin? No. It's mitzvah saseh shel grandma. Are women allowed to wear tefillin? Absolutely not. It's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch. Say, but what do you mean? Micha wore tefillin. Rashi's daughter wore tefillin. Yeah, that was before the Shulchan Aruch. But it was then paskind in the book of law that women are not allowed to. Not only are they exempt, they're not permitted to. It's a sin for a woman to wear tefillin. Who says? Rabbi Joseph, the Rama. Why? That's the discussion of the Mishnah Berurah and the Aruch HaShulchan. They both agree you're not allowed to. Why they're not allowed to? That's the machlokes. That's beyond the scope of this year. But women are not permitted to wear tefillin. Anyway, Ishtay Shayana Sa'ilo L'Regam. The wife of Yonah was other regal. Tavi Avdoi Sharon Gamliel Hayamaniach tefillin. Tavi wore tefillin. So he's a kosher. He's a Talmid Chacham. He likes the mitzvah of sukkah. He likes the mitzvah of tefillin. So you say, what do you mean? Maybe he didn't do correctly by wearing tefillin. Just because he did it, people do a lot of things. Says the Yerushalmi in Eruvin, Tavi Eved Ram Gamliel Hayanoisein tefillin v'leimichu biyadei chachamim. Tavi, the Eved Ram Gamliel, would put on tefillin, and the rabbis did not protest. In fact, the Yerushalmi in Sukkot says, Tavi Eved Ram Gamliel Hayanoisein tefillin v'leimichu biyadei chachamim. Uveka michu biyadai shloilid chakes hachachamim. Im shloilid chazam yashav lechutz l'saka. Roitz yitav abisham gamliel l'shmaya divrei chachamim. He wanted to hear the words of the rabbis. Okay, so this Tavi, interestingly, he's a kosher, he's a sage, he sits in the sukkah, he wears tefillin. Says the Medrash in Mishlei, Ma'isa haya b'meiran Gamliel azogin shem mesuben etzloi v'yatavi avi oimin m'shamsha Amr of Lezben Azariah Eilecha Kenan shechayeves bein tzadikim bein rishaim. Rabbi Lezer ben Azar said, woe to Kenan. They're all cursed. Rabbi Gamliel says, don't mess with Tavi. Bedinhu shehe Tavi yoshev ani m'shamsha. Really? I should be serving him. He should sit and I should serve him. So not only was he a sage, Rabbi Gamliel says he was a greater sage than him. So he wasn't just a regular LOR, local Orthodox, or LOS, local Orthodox slave. He wasn't even an LOR, local Orthodox rabbi. He wasn't even an LOT, local Orthodox Tana. He was greater than Tanoim. What else do we know about Tavi? So you say, what does this have to do with Parshas Noach? Well, you gotta be patient. The Gemara in Baba Kama says, Ma'aseh Ram Gamliel shesimas ein Tavi avdei. Ram Gamliel blinded his eye, knocked his eye out. Not only did Ram Gamliel blind his eye, v'haya sameach simcha gedola. Ram Gamliel had great joy. Matzah le Rabbi Yeshua, he found Rabbi Yeshua, Amalei yatu yadeh shetavi avdei yatsa cheres. You heard? Here's the Maisa. Tavi went free. Amalei lama. Rabbi Yeshua said, why? Amalei shesimaz samisias einai. I blinded his eye. Rabbi Yeshua says, he doesn't go free. Ein b'dvarecha klum. We don't believe you. Why? We have no edim. And an Eved goes free when you knock at his eye as a knas, and moida b'knas is pater. So bad job, Ran Gamliel. He doesn't go free. Because we only know that his eye is knocked out from you, but we can't trust you. Because moida b'knas is pater. So now we learned that Ran Gamliel knocked out Tavi's eye. Wow, what a unusual combination of biographical information we have. Tavi was a kosher. Tavi was a Talmid Chacham. Tavi sat in the sukkah. Tavi wore tefillin. Tavi was the greater than the Tanoim. Tavi had his eye blinded. Who is Tavi? Comes Reb Chaim Yosef David Azulai, the great Chida. Tavi, the slave of Ram Gamliel, drum roll please, was the gilgul of Cham. He was the gilgul of Cham. He was the good of Cham. He's the toiv of Cham. He's called Tavi. Now, where does this come from? The gematria of Tavi is 21. Im HaKoilel is 22. Namely, What's that? That's the final chaf. Tavi is a chaf. Why? Tavi is gematria, Tes is 9, Vez is 2, that's 11, Yud is 21. V'hu chaf ima koilel. The letter chaf ima koilel is 21. In other words, the letter chaf is 20, and with the letter itself is 21. So basically, Tavi is a chaf. So how's that? Let's explain. Cham is just missing. Cham is a bad guy. Cham did not act properly. He's just missing one little thing. He's missing the Tavi. He's missing the letter chaf. If you stick the chaf into Cham, you get Chacham. That's why Tavi was a Talmud Chacham. Cham is missing the chaf. Tavi is the ois chaf. Tavi is 21, the ois chaf is 21. And if you stick the chaf into Cham, you get Chacham. In fact, the Arizal, in the Shar HaGilgulim, as well as in Likutei Torah, he says, Lachein min Cham ben Noach yatsa Tavi avdoi Sham Gamliel. Lachein nikor Tavi al shem shehu mi b'chinas hatoiv shehois adam ureves bara. So even though Cham looks like a bad guy, and he did a bad thing, nevertheless there was a good spark in him. That was Tavi, and he was missing the Chaf, and that was sort of came to fruition through Tavi Avdoi Sharam Gamliel. So you say, wow, if Cham was Tavi, then if Tavi is Cham, who's Ram Gamliel? Interestingly, in Noach it says, Vayomer Arur Kinaan, Eved Avadim Yeh Le'achav. Cursed is Canaan, a slave of slaves he'll be to his brothers. Says the Ramami Pano and Gilgulei Neshamos, Rabban Gamliel is Shem and Aver. Rabban Gamliel is Shem and Aver, and his slave is Tavi, is Cham, and he is Eved Avadim Yeh Le'achav. So here's the question. How was it fulfilled that Cham would be an Eved Avadim to his brothers when Cham, Tavi, was a slave to his brothers, Shem and Aver, Rabban Gamliel? So the Mefarshim on the Ramami Pano says, wait a second, God never cursed Cham that he would be an Eved. God cursed Canaan. Canaan was the fourth son of Cham. So how do you reconcile that? Look at number 13 in Gilgulei Neshamos. Cham hu Tavi avdei Shem Gamliel v'zet tikunai. This is his tikkun. Misvar katan oila Cham kamay Tavi. Cham and Tavi have the same misbar katan. How's that? Ches and mem is 12. In other words, Ches is 4, mem is Ches is 8, mem is 4. That's 12, and Tavi is 11. How's that? Tavi 9, 11, 12. They're both 12. The misbar katan. V'yadua ki Cham eved avadim. Amr Rabba harbe avadim haya lecham avi Canaan. Deroi lismech ketavi avdoi Shem Gamliel. The Medrash says that there are many avadim Cham, the father of Canaan, had that are worthy for smicha like Tavi. Now, here's the question. The question again is, how could we say that when Hashem said, Arur Canaan Eved Avadim Yu La'achiv, that was fulfilled in Tavi, but that was a curse to Canaan, and Tavi was the gilgul of Cham, not the gilgul of Canaan. So again, how do you reconcile what the Ramami Pano is saying? The Ramami Pano says that Cham was the Eved Avadim La'echav through Tavi, but Hashem did not tell Cham Eved Avadim Yeh La'achiv. Hashem told Canaan that. So if Tavi was the gilgul of Chum, then how is that a fulfillment of Eved Avodim Yeh Le'echav? But Tavi was not connected to Canaan. Tavi was connected to Chum. So look at this Gemara in Masechta Yuma. The Gemara says, "Ashreim letzadikim lo ydayin shein zoichen." Fortunate are the righteous. It's not enough that they're zoiche. Ela shemazakin levneim atzav kol hadaros. They're mazaka their children, grandchildren until the end of all generations. Shekama banim hayolay la'aron. Sharuyin lisarv k'nadav avio. Many children Aaron had that were worthy to be consumed, like nadav avio. Shenemar hanoisarim ela shamalem zchus aviyam. Oylahem l'rsham lo'ydayin shemechayvin atzman ela shemechayvin levneim atzav kol hadaros. Harbe banim hayolay leKanan. Canaan had many children, Sheru'uyin Lismach, that were worthy for Smicha. Canaan had many children that were worthy for Smicha, Kitavi Avdei Shon Gamliel. Like Tavi, Ela Shechoy Vasavim Garmalahem. So what do we see from this Gemara is not only was Tavi a gilgul of Chum, but Tavi was a descendant of Canaan. This Gemara is saying that Tavi is a descendant of Canaan. And since Tavi is a descendant of Canaan, when God promised Canaan, Eved Avodim Yeh Le'echav, that was fulfilled in Tavi. What do you mean? But Tavi is the gilgul of Chum. What does he have to do with Canaan? We see from this Gemara, this is suggested by Megadim Chadashim, he says, V'yesh l'hoisav noifech b'zeh, d'yinei b'gilgulei neshama, to the Ramah, he writes that when Gamliel had the neshama of Shem ve'ever. And furthermore, he says, even though you could ask that this pasuk Eved Avodim was said about the fourth son of Canaan, nevertheless, Tavi was Mizera Canaan, as we see in the Gemara in Yuma. Now we have to understand, why then did Rabbi Gamliel knock out the eye of Tavi? We understand he wanted him to go free, but why did he dafka knock out the eye of Tavi? And the Ben Yehoyada Masechta Baba Kama says something astounding. He says that according to the Chida and the Dvash Lafi, that Tavi was the gilgul of Chum, and he was the good of Chum. Now, what was the Avera of Chum? Let's try to understand for a moment. What was the Avera of Chum? The Avera of Chum, Vayar Chum. Chum saw. Vayar Chum, Avi Kananes, Ervas Aviv. Chum saw. Vayage l'shnei achav mibachutz, and he told his two brothers outside. And the brothers, on the other hand, they were praised b'ri'iyah. It says, Vayechasu es arvazayim v'nei achrazar lo yira'u. So Chum sinned b'ri'iyah. Chum looked indecently at his father, but Shem and Yafes were careful not to look. Therefore, the Hashgacha Elyoina had it, and Gamliel would blind the eye of Tavi as a tikkun for the chet of Chum, who Vayar Chum Avi Kanan Eser Vasaviv. Now we understand why he blinded his eye. He blinded his eye because the sin of Chum was Vayar Chum Avi Kanan Eser Vasaviv. Now, let's try to understand, though, now that we understand, based on this Ben Yehoyada, why Ram Gamliel knocked out the eye of Tavi. Let's try to understand, why was Tavi specifically makbid in the mitzvah of tefillin and in the mitzvah of sukkah? Because we know there's a concept that there's 613 mitzvahs. It says in the end of Makos Chav Gimel Beis, Darash Reb Samloi Sheish Meos V'Shalish Esrei Mitzvahs Nemar Lo LaMoshe Shloish Meos V'Shishim V'Chamesh Lavin Kaminyan Yemais Hachama U'Masayim V'Arbam V'Shmoina Asei Keneged Evarim Sha'adam. We know we have 365 mitzvahs, communion the days of the year, and 248 mitzvahs aseh keneged evar shel adam. And the Marsha says that all the 248 evarim are keneged the mitzvah aseh. The lave is keneged emuna, anoichi Hashem Elokecha, because emuna is the source of all the mitzvahs, and the lave is the mishkan of the whole body. It's the makar of all reish mem ches mitzvahs aseh. So from this Marsha we see a great principle that each one of the mitzvahs of the Torah correspond to a different limb of a person. And therefore emuna, which is the heart of all the mitzvahs, corresponds to the lave. Interestingly, it says in Vayikra Rabbah, Bezois Yavai Aaron, that if a person did bundles of averos, you should do corresponding to them bundles of mitzvahs. If you're arrogant with your eyes, put on tefillin. If you spoke falsehood, teach Torah. You spilled blood, you should ukshartam la'ois al yadecha. Leiv cheresh machshavos oven, you should think Torah. So from here we see the tikkun for the einayim is tefillin. Tefillin is the tikkun for the einayim. By the way, in the Sefer Emek Bracha, he enjoins us to remember that the two tefillin correspond to the two agents of sin. One is in the eyes, and one is the heart. Therefore, we put tefillin on the eyes in order to be machnia the eyes. Says the Sefer Megadim Chadashim. Now we understand why Tavi was careful to wear tefillin, because as a tikkun for Vayar, as a tikkun for his eyes, he davka wore tefillin, even though he was pater from tefillin. Since tefillin is a tikkun for the einayim, and he sullied his eyes by looking indecently at his father, therefore he was specifically zahir in the mitzvah of tefillin. By the way, in the Sefer Ezar Eliyahu of Rabbi Eliyahu HaKohen of Izmir, he says an amazing thing. He says in tefillin there's a shin of 3 heads and 4 heads, right? We know that the shin on the tefillin shorosh has a 3-headed shin and a 4-headed shin. And he says, I have a tradition from the great Mekubal Reb David Chavilyo. The reason why we have a 4-letter shin, 4-headed shin, it's a remez to the satan of Kedusha. There are 2 satans. Even though we tend to think we only have one satan of Tumah and a satan of Kedusha, but in fact there is, even though we tend to think there's only one satan, there are 2. We think there's only a satan of Tumah, there's really a satan of Tumah and Kedusha. And the proof is, the pasuk says, Vayomer Hashem el satan, Yigar Hashem b'cha satan. Why does it say Vayomer Hashem el satan, Yigar Hashem b'cha? Why does it say Yigar b'cha Hashem hasatan again? So you read like this, Vayomer Hashem el satan, that's not of Kedusha, Yigar Hashem b'cha satan of Kedusha. And this satan is marumaz in the 2 shins. The shin of 4 letters, if you take out the 2 middle branches and you put one on top of the other, you get a final nun. And you're left with a tes. And then you have the shin of 3 branches is the shin, satan. Why do you wear satan on your head? You wear satan on your head to indicate that you always have to be careful, that you can't deviate for a moment because you have something looming over your head, namely the satan. The 2 shins on the tefillin shorosh spell out satan. You have the 2 middle branches of I think the phone, Rabbi Yisrael.
Welcome to Turbo Bridge. Please enter your conference ID and press the pound key.
Okay, I don't have the code, but we'll figure that out. The reason why we have the two shins, Rabbi Yisrael.
Please enter your conference ID and press the pound key.
Rabbi Yisrael, what's the code? The telephone went out.
The code, 4909. Is it phone number or the code?
Code.
4909.
The conference ID 4909 is not valid.
One more time?
Conference ID and press the pound.
09
Yeah.
9324 pound.
The conference is in question and answer mode. There are 4 parties
Okay.
in the conference. This call is being recorded.
So
You are
again,
a host.
we have the two shins that spell out Satan. The two middle branches of the four-headed shin is the final nun, when you put one on top of the other. It remains as a letter tes. And then the other shin, which spells out Satan. And again, the purpose of the tefillin is to guard one's eyes. V'lo sasuru acharei levavchem mi'acharei einechem. It's to help guard one's eyes. And the Megadim Chadashim quotes Rab David of Tolna that Sukkah is a lashon of histaklos, that through the mitzvah of Sukkah, one is masakin the kayach hariyah, and it's a tikkun for all the chataim. That's why Sukkah, which is goel malmei esrim amas, pasol because lo yeshota ba'ina. Anyway, interestingly, he says that it comes out amazing, says the Megadim Chadashim, why Tavi, the Aved of Ram Gamliel, was Mekayim these two mitzvahs, Sukkah and Tefillin, even though he was Pater, because these two mitzvahs are Masakein the Einayim, and we know Cham sinned, Vayar Cham, and therefore he was Mekayim these two mitzvahs. Even though it says the reason he slept under the bed is not to be Marchik the Talmidim, that implies that when there were no Talmidim, he was Mekayim the mitzvah, V'loi micha by Chachamim. Now why? To be Mesakin the koyach of Re'iyah. I would like to go in a bit of a different direction of, instead of saying that the reason why Tavi was Mekayim the mitzvah of Sukkah, to be Mesakin his Einayim, perhaps we could say a little bit differently, that Tavi was Mekayim the mitzvah of Sukkah, to be misakin a different element and a different aspect of his sin, namely, Tavi sinned bedibor. Because it doesn't just say, Vayar cham saw. It says, Vayar cham avi Kanan, and Vayagid. He spoke. He talked about it. It's bad enough he went to see his father in indecent shape, but he spoke about it. So there are two chataim, Re'iyah and Dibor. Re'iyah, I would say, he was masakein by wearing the tefillin. But what about Dibor? I would say Dibor, he was masakein by the mitzvah of Sukkah. And by the way, we could say, interestingly, that the Yushalmi in Shavuos brings a little bit of a different version of the story than we have in the Gemara. We mentioned from the Gemara in Baba Kama on Ayin Daled Amud Beis that Ram Gamliel knocked out the eye of Tavi. However, if you look in the Yushalmi, we have a little bit of a different gersa. Ma'aser Gamliel shehipo shein Tavi avdei. He knocked out his tooth. He went to Rabbi Yeshua. He says, Tavi avdi matzasi ila shachar. I figured I had to free him. So Rabbi Yeshua said, no, it doesn't work. There's no knas, only be'edim. And moedu knas is pater. Also Yishaming subas ma'aser Gamliel shehipo shein Tavi avdei. So not only did he knock out his eye, according to the Yisham, he knocked out his tooth. Why did he knock out his tooth? You could say because of his sin of Dibor. Because of his sin of Dibor. Ooh. And according to that, we understand why Tavi, the Eved of Rabbi Yehoshua, the Eved of Ram Gamliel, was makbid on the mitzvah of Sukkah. We don't have to say like the Megadim Chadashim that Sukkah is a tikkun for Re'iyah, but we've already said many times there's another Avera that Sukkah is Masakein. Sukkah is Masakein Dibor. Sukkah is Masakein Lashon Hara. Look at number 27. The pasuk says in Tehillim, Titzbenem besukkah meiriv l'shonos. God protects in the sukkah from the strife of language. The mitzvah of sukkah is machnia, the yetzer hara of lashon hara. By the way, the Gra says because the 4 letters of sukkah, samach, vav, chav, he, are found in all the different parts, the 4 parts of the mouth. The samach is from the teeth, the vav is from the lips, the chav is from the gutter, the throat, the he is from the kaf is from the palate, and the he is from the throat. And the mitzvah of sukkah protects from improper diburim. So perhaps the reason why Tavi was makbeh in the mitzvah of sukkah, not to be mesakein re'iyah, but rather to be mesakein dibur. What was the dibur? Vayar cham avi Kenan vayaged la'achiv bachutz. Vayaged. It was the diburim that Cham violated, and that's why he needed to rectify that through the sukkah. Now, here's what Noifech Lefianias Daiti. Here we could add the following very interesting addition. The Medrash Rabban Vayikra brings the following story. Amar Reb Shimon Gamliel LeTavi Avdei. Reb Shimon Gamliel said to Tavi, Puk Zvenli Tzadu Tavi Min Shukah. Now this is not Rabban Gamliel, this is Tavi, the slave of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Now, did Reb Shimon Gamliel yarshin Tavi? No, because that was the first Maramakim. Reb Gamliel was accepted nichumim for Tavi Avdai. So Reb Shimon Gamliel told Tavi, so is this the same Tavi? This might have been a different Tavi. Or, Puk zvinli tzadu Tavi min shuk. Go catch me a good catch from the market. Nafak zavan leilishon. He bought him a tongue. Amalei puk zavan tzadu bishim min shuk. Now go buy me a bad thing. Nafak zavan leilishon. He bought him a tongue. Amalei ma'udin. What is this? A good thing's a tongue, a bad thing's a tongue. So Tavi said, Amalei mine tavso umina bishta. It's the best thing, it's the worst thing. When it's good, there's nothing better than it. When it's bad, there's nothing worse than it. It's like the little girl. When she's good, she's really good. When she's bad, she's really bad. That's the tongue. Interestingly, who teaches us the lesson of the tongue? Tavi the Eved. The only thing is that, wait a second, is this the same Tavi? So the Rasha says, Nira d'tzarech lamer Rabban Gamliel. You have to say this wasn't Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, but rather Rabban Gamliel. Because we find in many places that Tavi was the slave of Rabban Gamliel in Sukkah, in Baba Kama, in many places. So therefore we have to change the girsa from Rabban Gamliel, from Reb Shimon Gamliel to Rabban Gamliel. So I would say that it comes out beautiful. This Tavi was not the slave of Reb Shimon Gamliel. This Tavi was the slave of Rabban Gamliel himself. And that is why Tavi, in order to be masakein his sin of Vayaged, he's now teaching us the kayach of the Lashain, which when it's good, there's nothing better than it. And when it's bad, there's really nothing worse. So we come to another amazing nekuda, and that is the Shlach Kadosh in Parshas Lech Lecha, who's bothered, why is Eretz Yisrael called Eretz Canaan? Even after it's in our possession, we still call it the land of Canaan, even when we're living in it. It's like, so imagine if somebody would mail a letter, New York, Confederacy, or New York, the colonies. I mean, we call the United States of America. Why would anyone call Eretz Yisrael Eretz Canaan? The Canaanim, there's a mitzvah to destroy them, to kill them. Why would we refer to, we don't call it Palestine, why would we call it Canaan? And even when Klal Yisrael lived in it, and we didn't stop calling it Canaan until many years after the second Beis Hamikdash was standing. Here's the side. Listen to this. Which king commanded to build the Beis Hamikdash? Koresh, the king of Paras. And then Eretz Yisrael was Nisyashva Shenis through Persia. Through Persia. Why? Tavi, the Eved of Ram Gamliel, who was the gilgul of Cham, was also the gilgul of Koresh. So since Eretz Yisrael only became ours through Koresh, who was really Canaani, therefore we continued to call it Canaan until Koresh allowed us back into the land. Meaning the Kabbalistic secret of why we call Eretz Yisrael Eretz Canaan, we called it that until the times of the second Beis Hamikdash. The Arizal said, Tavi, the Eved Kanani, was the Avdoi of Ram Gamliel, was the Gilgul of Koresh. And this side is alluded to in the Mishnah Brachos, that Ram Gamliel said about Tavi, he's kosher. You know what he meant, he's kosher? He's Koresh. That's the secret, that Tavi was kosher, that Tavi in fact was Koresh. So this Cham over here, who was missing the Chaf, if he had the Chaf, he would have been like Tavi, he would have been a Talmid Chacham. He came back as Tavi Eved Canaan. And this Eved Canaan was a kosher, namely that he was Koresh. He was a Talmid Chacham, indicating the Chaf of Tavi. And he wore tefillin to be Masakin Re'iyah. And he sat in the sukkah, either to Masakin Re'iyah or to Masakin his Diburim. And ultimately, he brought Klal Yisrael back to Eretz Yisrael in the guise of Koresh, and he allowed us to enter the land. So it's quite a remarkable chain of events. And this is just a little bit of a Te'ima Ba'alma in the behind the scenes of the narratives of the Chumash that we're so familiar with, and yet the personalities and the way the Rebban Shem orchestrates that people should ultimately get their tikkun, v'layidach imenu nidach, and that everything comes full circle is only through the hashgacha yoina of the Borei Olam. And with that, I leave you until next time, wishing everyone a wonderful day. Bracha v'atzlacha, v'kol tov. That's what he's saying. He's saying that Cham was Tavi, and then Koresh. So that does that mean Cham came back as Koresh?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So maybe there's some tikkun there too.
Yeah. We'll see. I might speak about that on Wednesday, actually. Okay. Kol tov, everyone. Have Baruch Tia. Thank you. Kol tov. Bye-bye.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.